We will call to order the Oak Island Town Council Special Meeting Workshop, July 24th, 2014. Purpose of the workshop is, number one, that we have a couple of consent agenda items and then presentation on proposed parking management plans by Lanier Parking and some discussion of parking issues with the town manager. Chair will first entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items, please.
Madam Mayor,
Please.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion by Councilor Painter, second by Councilor Kaiser. All those in favor, please. And it is unanimous. Mr. Foster, if you don't mind, if you could introduce representatives from Lanier.
Yes, I would like to ask for the regular agenda that I be added for introductory comments. I don't know if that's necessary or not, but.
Yeah, we'll consider this as introductory to this portion of this agenda item number 2. How about that? And we'll just ask the clerk to record introductory comments by the town manager.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. I hope Kyle puts my screen down.
There it goes.
He heard you.
From your lips to Kyle's ears. You guys hear a little bit of feedback
I don't hear
in the
it.
microphones? Yeah.
They hear it out there?
Kyle, I think we have just a little bit of feedback or echo or something in the microphones.
Sounds better now.
Okay. Carol said that's better.
All right. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about parking policy and parking management issues that we have with the town. And if the board remembers, they set this date tonight, back July 8th meeting, to talk a little bit about some of the things that are going on as far as parking with the town of Oak Island. Because this past, in a good way, this past July 4th and this summer we've had a bumper crop of cars and tourists. And we're glad they're coming, but we've got to figure out where to put all their cars, which I think sometimes has become somewhat of an issue. Some of the parking issues that I thought would be germane and something that we need to talk about is, first of all, is there enough resident parking? Are we providing enough spots for our residents to be able to come to the beach where they can take their car down there and park it and not have to worry about having to find a parking space? And secondly, second issue is what to do with increased day visitor demand. You'll see in a few minutes with some of the figures that we have, it's really gone up as far as the number of vehicles that we're trying to accommodate, and it's becoming a little bit more pressure on the town each and every year that we go along the current method that we're using. Third issue would be, how can the town have day visitors share in the maintenance and renourishment of the cost of our as I like to call it, our 6.25 mile long state park that we maintain not only for our residents, but for the residents of Brunswick County, the residents of the state, and we have, as I understand it, over 43 states this past summer. They have had visitors come to visit with us, which we're really glad to see come down and visit, but there is a cost associated with that. And I guess the issue would be, how do we help them help us in helping share maybe in some of these costs that we have? Another issue, it's not an issue, but it was something that we endeavor or hope to do, is to cut down and reduce personnel expense to the town involved in administering of the current parking administration and what we can do to help cut costs on that corner. You know, we are in a cost-cutting mode still, so we're doing the best we can with that. Is it time to consider paid parking? And what can we do about improving enforcement that we have now? You'll see in a few minutes, I think the police department said this past year they wrote 279 tickets for violations, but with the enforcement that they had and the number of calls they get, enforcement is not to their detriment, to their fault, but they have limited resources to provide calls, protection, direct traffic, and all the other things they do. And unfortunately, parking is somewhere down the list somewhere, but they still write quite a few tickets. First question, is there enough resident parking? A few statistics that we came up with that might help us out a little bit is that we issued this past year in fiscal year 13-14, 4,661 blue stickers. That's a lot of stickers, ladies and gentlemen. And we're still issuing them. I think since July 4th, we have 661 additional stickers that we're issuing. The estimated, as far as where they're using these stickers down in the beach parking areas, it's an estimated usage rate east of 40th Street. It's about 100% usage. So in other words, the east side of the island over here past 40th Street is where everybody chooses to go to the beach. For whatever the reason, that seems to be the case. Use spaces west of 40th, it's approximately 50% usage. I'm not sure why that is, but that's the way it is. Maybe Van might want to talk about that in a few minutes. And when I get finished with this slide, I'm going to ask Mr. Jordan if he could come up, or Mr. Franks, one of the two, and go over the maps that we've located as far as parking violations. They'll show you pretty much where that would be, or those areas are. Total number of spaces available that we have now, all the parking spaces, is 1,110. I believe that was close to the same number you came up with, wasn't it? Yeah. All right. On the issue of ability to have the town, have the day visitors share in the maintenance and renourishment of the cost of our beach, first question is who's paying for beach maintenance and who's paying for future renourishment? Well, in looking at the figures on this, weekly rentals, that vacationers, weekly vacation rentals pay 95% of the costs at this point for regular beach maintenance and what we put away for beach nourishment every year. The taxpayers, I think they got a pretty good deal. They only pay 5% of the cost, and then the day visitors pay 0% of the cost. Right now, the estimated cost of renourishment per mile of beach, depending on sand source, the distance the hydraulic dredge has to pump, and a number of other factors, ranges from $3 million to $5 million per mile. That's a lot of money. Right now, as I mentioned earlier, we have 6.2 miles of beach, and at the average of somewhere around $4 million per mile, that would come up to a $25 million price tag to completely renourish the beach, or in a 2-year cycle, over 8 years, because it has to be renourished on a regular basis, it'll be over $50 million to come up with the money to do that. I think I figured out, based on a population of 7,500 people, every man, woman, and child in the town of Oak Island would have to come up with a check for $3,333. That's quite a substantial amount. I don't know how many kids you want to put a price tag on their head so they got to pay for the beach sand. Right now, current revenues or accommodations tax that we're collecting is around $1.1 million, which isn't coming close to what our demand's going to be for renourishment projects all up and down the beach. The approximate visitors base in our service area, and that would be in Leland, Brunswick Forest, all the subdivisions on Highway 133, subdivisions on Highway 211, Boiling Spring Lakes, Bolivia, Supply, Southport, misspelling, and St. James. We figure or calculate there between 47,000 to 51,000 potential visitors that we have since we're the closest beach to those areas. That's a lot of people. And those people are growing exponentially because more and more subdivisions are coming in and more development's coming in. So this is not going to be static at that number. It's going to continue to go up over the upcoming years. Who pays the bill? Well, we've got a little problem down there on the west end right now, but unfortunately it's not just isolated to the west end anymore. I think we have problems all up and down the beach, and I don't know how many times I got phone calls on the rocks on the beach this summer. And it is bad, and we recognize it's bad, and the only thing that we're going to be able to do to fix that is to come up with some type of program, which we currently have a coastal engineering company working on, to put sand on top of those rocks. Now, those rocks go down a long way. I've heard anything from 15 feet to 30 feet deep, so just going out there and trying to pick them up is not an option, because if the sand washes off, you could be down there from here into eternity picking up rocks down on that beach. So that's not exactly something that we want to do. However, having said all this, who should pay the bill? Well, right now the vacation rental folks are helping a lot with it, and the town's helping with it, but we're not getting any money from the people that actually come down there, and a lot of them that come to the beach, to Oak Island, just to come to the beach. We're not getting anything out of that. So it's kind of an unequitable distribution of responsibility. If we have a hurricane, these are pictures of houses that were after the hurricane, or beach houses. I guess that was 1999, I think is when that was. And this is what it looked like. And it's a mess. And even before this, and I think Dara was around during that time, it was bad before Floyd. The erosion had washed out quite a few of these houses. Or put sand from under these houses when I was here. If you went offshore and you looked back on the beach, it looked like a bomb went off, because there was no sand left up under these houses. So then Floyd came along, and as you see, it didn't improve the situation any at all. And I thought too today, when I was coming back down the beach from where I was going to look at something up down at the west end, I thought to myself, with all the people that are down here and all these cars, and all these folks here, I just wonder if some of our visitors would come back, if we did have a storm or bad erosion, to come back and help us with this. And I thought, maybe they wouldn't, maybe they wouldn't, but I'd like to think that they would, but you never know. As I mentioned earlier, we had 200, the other issue is trying to reduce costs, reduce personnel costs of the town involved with administering the current parking administration. We issued, as I mentioned, 279 tickets during FY 13-14, which is not that many, but we did issue 4,661 parking decals. The time to issue each sticker takes around 15 minutes, and in fiscal year 13-14, 1,165 hours were spent, or one half-time position, to issue these stickers. The time to identify, as far as the enforcement process, the time to identify the stickers and write-up got up to about 8 minutes, which is not very long. Time to collect the fine was around 15, unless they appeal the ticket, which most of them we get appeals on, because they never did anything wrong. I don't guess anybody ever does, but they like to come talk with me about getting their tickets set aside. Well, that takes an estimated 20 minutes to do that, because they got to show me the picture, they got to state their case, and then I have to come along and make a decision on it. It takes about 20 minutes. So the estimated time per ticket on enforcement is 43 minutes. On the appeal, if it's not, we estimate closer to about 23 minutes not appealed. The issue is, one of the issues is the time to consider paid parking and considerations. Well, what it would do for us, we feel like, it may potentially, depending on what the board sees fit to do, it may be a better management of reserved parking spots for residents, which right now it's not, we try, but it's, with the number of people we have, it's a very difficult thing to keep up with. I noticed on the proposal from Lanier that they're estimating that they probably have close to 53 parking violations a day. And look at the number that we had, just total for 279 for a whole year. That's not that many, so obviously there's a lot of violations that are going unticketed out there on the beachfront. Less administrative expense for the taxpayers, another benefit. Sharing of costs by non-paying visitors and taxpayers. more efficiency in the way the operation is run. We're not the only ones looking at this. Right now, the towns that have currently had success in paid parking operations are Atlantic Beach, Emerald Isle Beach, Carolina Beach, and Wrightsville Beach. And that's pretty much it for me. And I'm going to introduce Carrie Lomas, who's with Lanier Parking. I asked her to put a little program together to see, kind of tell the board and the audience what they can do for the town and some of the advantages, maybe some of the drawbacks of paid parking, what they can do and what they can't do. So with that, I'll introduce Carrie Lomas.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Members of council, mayor, citizens of Oak Island, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you all this afternoon, this evening, about some of the parking concerns that Steve has brought up. Certainly, I'm going to be the first to tell you that paid parking is not going to cure all of your problems. In fact, it might create some new headaches. But there are a lot of advantages to having a managed parking system, and tonight I want to walk you through some of the successes that we have had as a company with a lot of the municipalities that are neighboring around you. Personally, myself, I've been with the company for the past 10 years, working with municipalities just like yourself, developing solutions day in and day out. We're known for custom fitting solutions that are based on your needs, not ours. So I like to create a very informal setting. If you have questions when I go through the presentation, which is not very in-depth tonight, but I want to hear more from you. I want to hear what your concerns are, what you would like us to address, so that I can come forth to council on a regular agenda item and present the whole concept to you. So with that being said, let me back out of here. I got it. Yeah, I got it. I think. Yay. All right, some of the current issues. I've been working with the town of Oak Island. Some of you know me, some of you don't, but I've had the opportunity to work with the town for like the past year. And basically, I've been able to see some of the concerns that Steve and his staff have certainly observed. The ability to better safeguard reserved spaces for your taxpayers and residents. Right now, you have a total of 119 residential spaces that are not really being enforced. So is it really serving the residents, or is it better serving the visitors? At this point, it's still a little unclear. Reducing the expenses for the town due to the extensive cost of the town service delivery system. The goal is whether the expenses are the town service delivery system or whether it's the beach renourishment, it's to subsidize whatever you deem the revenues to be suited for. Additional maintenance costs charged to the town by support day trippers. So you have day trippers that come down. Well, they also bring you their kids, and they bring trash, and they leave that behind, and they leave that behind for the town's workers to pick up. All of that costs the town money, which comes from the local taxpayers. And then the permit administration. There's going to be many burdens that we've all kind of talked about, briefed about, but permit administration is something that we're willing to take off the town's shoulders. So to look at your current available parking, when I did my research, my numbers were very close to the towns. And basically, as you look, the majority of your parking is at 52% of your parking is on the second row. 33% of your parking is oceanfront. And then you've got a good 12% that makes up your reserve parking for your residents. And then, of course, you've got the handicap parking, which equates to about 3%. I probably could just stop that. So the advantage of a managed paid parking system, you could reduce, in the town of Wrightsville Beach, for instance, we've had a parking contract with them since 2004. And we've been able to not only flood their general fund with about 19% of parking revenue, which supports a lot of the weight that you guys are carrying on yourselves, but it also has allowed the residents to maintain their property tax level. So they're not taking that increase. They're able to pass it on, to the people who are actually visiting their island. The beach nourishment funding, as Steve had talked about, this is a big hit up along the coast where some, counties and some towns are able to get grants, some are not. But paid parking is something that can help subsidize that. Offset expenses managed and paid for by the town to support the visitors. And I hinted on that earlier. They create a cost. It's great to have them down here, and I love that they enjoy your community, but they do bear a cost that's associated, and it shouldn't be borne by the people who live here in Oak Island. Reduces the parking administrative headaches, as Steve had talked about. Whether it's appealing a citation or if it's paying for a decal, this should not burden your staff. creates a safe and friendly environment for the visitors. Ambassadorship, I'll get into that a little bit later in the slides, maps in our change program. And it improves your overall visitor and residential experience because of our people on the streets. And again, I'll get into that later. Oh, thank you. I knew there was an easier one. Just to give you some of the statistics with some of your neighboring communities that actually do have paid parking, it's more of a food for thought slide. But the town of Wrightsville Beach currently has 1,501 spaces. We've been partnering with them since 2004. We have a very good relationship with them. The rate per hour is $2.50. City of Wilmington, they've got 780 on-street spaces. We've been partnering with them since 2008, and we recently innovated their pay-by-phone parking concept that they never had in place before us. So that was done back in 2009. The City of Myrtle Beach, which I know is not comparable to Oak Island in many ways, but it does have 1,700 spaces. We've been partnering with them since 2004. Their current rate's $1.50 per hour. And I'll go into the technology later. I'd like to take a second. This is Bryant Sykes. He's our area manager in Wrightsville Beach. He is my right hand in a lot of problems that I go through on a daily basis, not problems you should go through on a daily basis. But he's been with the company for about 6 years now, and he's right in your backyard. I am based out of Wilmington, North Carolina. I'm not somebody that has to fly in, fly out. You're not going to see me just once. I'm somebody that's actually vested in your community. I've already spent a year working, and Steve hasn't paid me a dime. That's okay. I love providing solutions to towns for their consideration. It's a custom fit design. We are a one-stop turnkey solution. We definitely have the technical expertise, we've got the innovative technology, we've got the integrity behind the science. The financial backing is something that I think you've seen in our proposal, is something that I'll get more in depth to in the next presentation, providing you allow me to come back. And of course, I want to maximize your revenue. And then just a snapshot, the Myrtle Beach is 33% gross increase over the first year. Carolina Beach experienced 44% increase after we took over. And then Wrightsville Beach has an 11% net increase over the entire term of the contract. So each year it keeps getting better and better. Each year it keeps growing and growing. And each year the visitors become more educated and more compliant with the system. As I mentioned before, we are a turnkey parking management company. We will come in and we will set up your appeals. We'll work closely with your legal department, your town manager, your staff, and we'll design the appeals, the ordinances to set forth. We'll set up a adjudication process, which will allow people to appeal a citation. If they don't like our decision, they can go to somebody else. We will manage all of your citation collections. We will do that in-house. We will not outsource that unless we deem that it's appropriate, and then we will come forth to council stating exactly why it needs to be done. But typically our success rate by just doing it in-house is anywhere from 82% to 73% collection rate. Towing and mobilization, basically that comes down to booting when you're talking to a municipality. You don't like to tow the vehicle, but booting is a negative that, it's something that just has to come with the program when you have unpaid citations, unfortunately. Online applications, we're fully versed with supplying the town and the persons who do receive a citation a way to appeal online and also to pay online. So we make it as convenient as possible for people who are impacted by violations. We will detail client reports for you in every facet so that you understand more about parking than you ever wanted to know, trust me. We're definitely capable of rolling out pay by cell, which is a very convenient method to pay for parking. And then of course we're very equipped in maintaining your equipment. Linear's ambassadors, we are the eyes and ears for the town, and we install the core values into our team, and we like to make sure that when they're out there, they're representing the town. They're not police officers, and they don't pretend to be. They will be out there in, say, a white polo shirt, looking very friendly in their khakis, and they're equipped with maps, they're equipped with coin, they are very familiar with your town, your ordinances, and they are out there to coach the public, whether it be a resident or a visitor to your island, exactly what they should be doing to comply with the law. Okay, they help pick up trash, and they're here to support us. Part of the role is to write a citation, but that is not their number one responsibility here. Their number one responsibility is to make sure that they're talking to people 5 feet away, they're waving at people 10 feet away. And this is just a reference that we had at Myrtle Beach, who they actually love us, and I know you guys don't, but but at any rate, I thought it was kind of cute to throw that in there because, again, I like succeeding. I like providing results that are proven statistically. So it makes me very happy when I make our clients happy. So with that being said, I would like to open it up to questions that you may have, concerns that you would like to have addressed, anything for me or the town at this point.
The number of parking spaces that you referred to, is that just in the dedicated beach access areas?
Yes, sir.
But, wait, I'm good.
And all those spaces are first or second, whether they're beachfront accesses or on the side
Ones
streets.
that go from Dolphin south on Beach Drive.
And this includes the parking areas south of the soccer fields. Danny, you have any questions?
Yes, I don't know how to word this to get it to come out right, so I'll try.
Just say it.
Right now, we have the blue stickers for the residents to get preferred. If I have a sticker and I will still get to park in a reserved place, will that get me to park free in a non-reserved place?
The way that I have devised the numbers at this point, that would not, because I needed to streamline where the revenue was coming from, so I needed to have a clean source. When we started looking at the system, you had about 20,000 permits that were issued, and I know that that's been reduced to about 7,400 now, and that's a huge fleet to accomplish, but it's a hard system to manage from my aspect. So when I came back to the town and I saw that they had placed up signs, it was the perfect opportunity for me to be able to measure the amount of occupancy, who was parking at the signs and who was parking in the spaces, which is what led into our numbers. We're not opposed to increasing the number of reserved spaces, but there does need to be a defined line with where the residents are allowed to park. And it doesn't have to be, you have to be second row, it just has to be a defined number so that I can allocate the occupancy
Can I say
accordingly.
one thing too? What she's doing, what this would take is if the board is interested in doing this. By the way, we did look at 3 different companies on this and evaluated them. And Lanier came out on top, just so that we went through a fair due diligence process on this. But what they would like to do would be to work with the board to come up with a parking system that would be compatible with what we would like to see, and then base it on what they would need in order to make it work. So this right now, I mean, we can ask detailed questions, but I think that they would, and I know that we would probably be willing just to sit down and to go over what we would like to do or how we'd like to see it, especially in the case of residential, parking and what we could do with the fees and this and that. There's just a wide variation of things that we could take a look at and change. Carrie, did I say that okay?
You did it perfectly.
All right.
What about the areas, excuse me, where we have the yellow parking bumpers? Those are dedicated parking spaces, may not be on the beachfront street, they may be on the side streets. Did you include those in your count?
The wheel stops?
No, the park, where they have the yellow parking bumpers.
That's the same thing.
That's the same thing, isn't it, right? Yes, yes, sir, I did. Anything that had something that stood out to me as a parking spot. There was also, a series of parking spots which I discussed with the town that could be additional. And there's some research that needs to go on to make sure who's in the right of way and all of that good stuff, but there's some that could be added to the summary that I put together. I put together the most blatantly, easily black and white picture that I could come up with from just the naked eye.
Motion, Carol.
So in here where you have estimated 64 multi-unit,
Units? Yes, ma'am.
and then 54, I guess, or something around there, of just single space. And I'm just trying to envision how you see that. How does that work, the multi-unit versus the single?
Space. So the equipment I didn't get an opportunity to go into, but I'll do that for sure. The single space really operates as a single space. You park directly in front of it and you pay that meter. These meters are equipped, you can insert your credit card, you could call by cell, you could insert coin. Your multi-space meters is what is going to be used on majority of the street ends, and they're going to be put right in the middle on the second block so that people who pay there, which can pay with credit card or cash, Pay by sell is fine, but you bring your parking receipt back to your car and you place it face up in your dash. And this allows people to pay for parking, park in that spot. If they pay for, say, 6 hours and it starts to rain and they're like, you know what, let's go grab some lunch, they can take that paid parking receipt, go grab lunch, and come back after the rain is gone and park again. Because in all honesty, they paid for parking for 6 hours. So why not give them the ability to move around your island and enjoy it, as long as they're parking legally?
Also, under the proposed agreement, you mention a guaranteed lease. It says Lanier will pay the town of Oak Island a guaranteed lease payment of $50,000 per year for a contract term of 5 years. Is that the full extent of the revenues that would come to the town?
With that particular offer, it is. Now, I've spoken with Lanier on multiple occasions, as I have with the town. We've actually put forth 2 offers for your consideration. You know, Lanier is investing 100% of the capital costs, which is equating to right now right under $404,000. And so our purpose was to design a program that would enable us to just recoup that capital investment over the course of the contract. Now, when there's been many discussions about fines, and I think Bonnie might have a few things to say about that in a couple of minutes, but the fines, you know, if the town invokes, okay, we're going to set the fine rate here, I don't want you to steer your decisions as municipal leaders to better fit us. It's about better fitting you. So if it comes down to where it's going to make more sense, instead of us giving you a flat lease offer, we will give you a percentage rent. Okay, so, or we could do a revenue sharing option. So that way it would be compatible for you and I. So as much as the parking revenues come in based on your decisions, you'll be able to take forth and take in that value as well. So I'm stating that, yes, that is our proposal, our second one, but I will be more than flexible to work with you.
Here, can I say one thing? Here again, this is something that would have to be meshed out in a customized type of program with us. Yes. But they do have a rather substantial capital cost they need to recoup. For that period of time. I guess it was, 5 years?
Yes, sir.
5 years to do it. So, and that would be after that, you would revisit it after the capital costs have been recouped.
Absolutely.
And then in other words, this is just getting our foot in the door to get everything set up. And after a 5-year period, you negotiate out, just open negotiations with Lanier for what percentage or how much you'd want to get. I think in Wrightsville Beach's case, how much are they getting?
It's 3.33% of gross revenue right now. So
how much does that equate in dollars? How much does that equate in dollars to them?
Well, to them, okay, their parking rate, they're about a $2.7 million operation. So that's some pretty good change. But that's not what I'm proposing your revenue to be day one. They've had their parking system in place since 2001. So we took a very modest approach to designing your program, based on statistical data, not just Wrightsville Beach, but your neighboring communities and the demographics of the people who actually visit this area. So I was not aggressive by any means in revenue assumptions. I was very conservative, and I can go into that area if you want me to in the council meeting and explain where I came from what. But we were conservative from a revenue standpoint for sure.
I wonder if from just the towns that you've listed, I'm not sure that any of those are very comparable to Oak Island in just how our town is designed and set up, and
I can respect that.
So I just wonder, because what we see on any weekend is our public right-of-ways that are right along, our residential areas that are right across the street from the beach or on the beachfront. People are just parking wherever they can,
right,
in the public right-of-way. So I was just wondering to what extent that, just if you could talk about that a little bit.
Sure, sure. You know, whenever you rolled out paid parking, it's rolled out in a couple of different phases, if you want to say. So you create paid parking, and what does that do? That makes everybody run to where there's free parking, what does that do? It piles into your yards. It piles into your driveways. It blocks your driveways. It pushes them elsewhere, everywhere but where they should be paying. So the phase 2 of it is identifying those areas, just like you probably already know where they are, but then creating ordinances that support parking in a designated spot. You know, the town of Wrightsville Beach, off the top of my head, their ordinance states that you must park within the white lines. Now, I know a lot of your streets, some of them aren't paved, so you wouldn't state it as that way, but we would identify how the patron would know what is a designated spot. A lot of towns, a lot of cities, especially beaches, they don't like parking signs. You know, it doesn't look good. But if you can put the ordinances, obviously, it's not your responsibility to post every single ordinance, but it would be our job to educate. So as long as we had the ruling underneath to support what needed to be done, it would be our job to educate the public as much as possible. There's warning periods, there's different ways, there's media blitzes, there's different ways to get the changed ordinances out to the public so that everybody understands what they should be doing. But that's part of the trial with getting people to understand a managed system. So, but you would have to put in ordinances to answer your question, to support where you want them to park. Maybe you state that you don't want them to park on the grass. If they park on the grass, then we would issue them a citation, you know, and that would be set at the level that you deem necessary. That would be treated as a restricted parking ticket. So if they didn't pay for parking, it would be an overtime parking ticket. They didn't pay for parking. So there's different rules and regs.
As a add-on, please, to that question, if you don't mind, we have the unique situation in that Beach Drive is owned by the state of North Carolina.
What now?
Beach Drive
Yeah.
is owned by the state of North Carolina. Do we have the authority?
Yes, I could answer that. We can add, they establish it, but we ask them if we can establish them, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, as a no parking zone. And they generally 99.9% of the time agree to go along with whatever we wish to do.
So in the future.
Is that correct, Dan?
We could prohibit parking in the right-of-way along Beach Drive, if we please. Okay. I'm sorry, Carol.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to imagine how in the world we would have enough places for people to park if we didn't have our right-of-ways, public right-of-ways. I mean, I know a lot of people really dislike it in front of their houses, but then what we're talking about here is not nearly enough parking to support.
Well, that's a problem, but you know, if you look at it, Councilor Painter, we've got 1,010,
About 1,009 spaces.
10
Yep.
parking spaces, and she just had on her board, how many did you have? Could you bring that up again for the number of spaces that they had for these other towns?
Oh, other towns?
Yeah.
Oops.
Oops.
Oops. Stop. Okay.
There we go. If you look at it, the city of Wrightsville Beach has 1,501. We've only got, what, 300 or 400 less than that. City of Wilmington, we got more than the city of Wilmington on street parking spaces. And we almost have as many as the city of Myrtle Beach. So if that's not enough parking, I mean, there's a problem. I don't know what the answer is.
Well, but that's where I'm just trying to think through, you know, in the city of Wilmington and Wrightsville Beach and so on, they have curbs and they have, you know, we just have street going right into grass or pub, you know, I'm having a hard time.
What you'd have to do
Is your stance to have that as a paid parking area to allow them to park as far back as they want to as long as they're available parking, or would you prefer that they don't park on the grass?
Well, I'm just trying to imagine how in the world we handle as many people as have been coming here and parking here. How in the world we would, you know, where will they go?
I think a lot of the vast majority of the transient rentals, the tourists, I mean, they're renting a home on the beach, so they park in the driveway of that particular home. So we're not trying to we're not talking about trying to provide parking for 30 to 40,000 people in 1,000 spaces.
Well, I mean, I understand that,
I
but,
think it's about the only week that we see every single, pretty much parking space taken up, except for Southeast 71st and 72nd. That's a different animal altogether. The holiday weeks, July 4th especially, we have quite a bit of
A
overflow.
good example of what Carol's talking about, at the end of my street, we have about 9 or 10 parking spaces, designated parking spaces on the beach access. And last Saturday, I counted the cars that were parked there, and there was 38 cars parked in that general area right there. So they were parked up the street, on a vacant lot, down the street, in people's yards, and everywhere.
Well, I tell you what, these folks you would ticket.
We would ticket if that's what you wanted. Now, if you want them parking, then my advice would be to find some way within the town to identify where you want them parking, because for my guys to remain the reputation of being ambassadors, it's got to be pretty cut and dry for them as well as the public. And then it becomes very easy to understand. So we're not opposed of having this, which is why proposed the technology that I did, is because that pay station gives you the ability to park wherever you want to. And it's up to you to decide where you want them to park. So we can control it as long as you have an idea of where you think you want this to be.
So if we had the areas that were legal to park in designated with a yellow wheel bumper,
Yes, sir.
then that would be a legal space. And if they parked there, they would just have the sticker on their dash where they had paid for it, and they would be legal, right?
They would be legal.
If they didn't have the sticker, then they'd get a ticket.
And I think we need to identify before, Lanier starts, before the capital outlay comes forward, we need to clearly identify where we want the residents to be able to park. Do we want them parking all the way? I mean, is that what I'm curious to know, if that was majority of the people who were blocking the street? Is a lot of residents who are coming in with permits? No, these are day trippers, right?
It isn't. Day trippers. Yeah, most of the residents that live on our street, they have a golf cart or they walk down there.
Exactly.
And I had a question, and you just made me forget what it was.
Well, I got
Think of that.
I got an example for you too, and you know this as well as I do. Down at 17th Place West is a hot spot for bait fish, and everybody piles in there, parks down the side of the streets. How are you going to determine if they're out there bait fishing or parking to go to the beach? I mean, you can't sit there and put parking meters to charge them to go bait fish, get bait. I mean, it's just different things, different scenarios.
That I don't think we'll be
I
able
think
to.
that's something that you'd have to sit down with a map and work
That's what
out
I'm
with
saying,
these
yeah.
folks, yeah.
And as a side question to that one, my thought when you stated a while ago that we have so many of our spaces used east of 40th and so few used west of 40th.
With the exception of Kings Lynn, which.
Kings Lynn is always that's a different animal altogether. Perhaps we can look at, get you and Lanier or staff to look at providing as many spaces as possible east of 40th and look at rearranging the spaces west of 40th.
Well, that's one of the things I feel like that we really need to do to accommodate residents, is to make sure we have enough spaces for them at any one time. Right now, we've got 119, and they're not being fully utilized now. Of course, now the deal is that they might not be parked in those, but we're thinking that that's probably pretty reflective of the number of people that are actually using, because you're not going to have everybody going to the beach at one time.
Yeah.
You're just having to look at your percentages and say.
Well,
And to
even
that
July
point,
Beach Day, July 4th weekend, this parking space behind the soccer fields here, south of the soccer fields, it was about half full.
And then
But
the
they were
other,
parked all up and down the side of the road.
and
They
then
wanna
the
get
other
as
thing
close to the
is,
beach as they
this
can.
50%, this 100% that we have east of 40th Street, then maybe we need to be looking at more parking spots for residents down there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably what we
That
need
was,
to do.
that was a question I had, Steve, and I think that's a very valid concern, because if I pay for, I live here, if I pay for a sticker for my car, and I want to go down and park at the beach access, and they're all full, but there's one vacant that's not designated for, I want to be able to park there. I don't think we ought to be penalized for that. Another question, and this is something probably just kind of out of the box. but there's a possibility of some land that we could lease from a property owner to create a parking lot. How would you treat that, with a multi-pay station or individual meters?
Give me an idea of how many spaces you have.
Danny, you know how many?
You know, probably.
Oh, gosh.
A bunch? Then I would do multi-space.
Oh, probably more than 40, probably.
There's 50 to 60 that you could
You gotta-
It's two parcels. It stretches out, it stretches from Barbie to Sherrill.
Okay.
It's up there where we burnt the old beach house down at the old.
Van did a study,
I don't know how many.
on it.
I'm looking at about 60 spots just
Yeah.
Really?
in that block. That's one.
In the whole block or just the,
That whole block.
okay.
So we wouldn't have the whole block, we just have a portion of it.
Well, the owner of the other part's willing to do something too. He's,
But
have
in
to
a,
look at what they would ask for an annual lease on
in a
that.
case like that, would you use the individual meters or the multi-pay station?
It would be a multi-space.
Okay.
It would be a multi-space because you want a multi-space is best used for anything that has about 20 spaces. We've got lots in not Myrtle, I'm sorry, Brightsville Beach. There are about 50 spaces, and we have 2 pay stations there. Because it all depends on when the people show up to go. Are they all beach goers? Are they parking at the same time? You don't want that line to be long, or et cetera. So I would definitely not use a single space. You get down to the math of it and the cost of the equipment, and it just makes more space or more sense to do it with multi.
Both of these could be activated by cell phone, right?
Yes, sir.
Single space and the multi-space?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And that service actually notifies you before you get a parking citation. It gives you time to extend your time. So it's more of a positive thing where you could sit right on your beach chair and you get a text message and it says, hey, do you want to add more parking? You're like, oh, yeah, let me go ahead and do that. And you don't even have to get off your beach chair. So there's perks.
Do you have programs, we mentioned, $2.50 an hour is exorbitant.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I
It is
can't
definitely
imagine.
the high end.
Even $1.50 an hour may be exorbitant. Do you have programs, or would you be able to work with a program that someone could pay for a day pass?
Sure. Sure, we typically have day pass users, we have weekly pass users, we also have daily and hourly parkers. These pay stations are able, you can configure whatever kind of rate that you want to configure, and then the parker, it's up to them to select which one they want. So,
I noticed that you've proposed the amortization of capital costs over 5 years, but how long does the equipment typically last?
the equipment is really going to outdate itself by technology. I mean, that is something that I cannot put my finger on. I can tell you that the equipment will be under warranty going into year 2, which is, if you looked at that, you saw the revenue or the net drop a bit. That's because it all becomes under warranty. And in the off-season, Lanier is going to remove your equipment. We're going to take it into a storage place, hopefully, that the town will be able to provide, that will be able to refurbish this equipment that will extend its lifetime. So the stock answer from the manufacturer is anywhere from 7 to 12 years. I've seen our team extend that at least double. What is really that is going to impact you the most is the technology, like PCI compliance. You know, the changes that Bill Gates did just this year impacted the parking industry as a whole. Those things, we have 3 very good vendors that we work with, one in particular that I've chosen for the town that we'll be able to work with and get those firmware upgrades. So it's going to outlast the length of the contract, to answer your question, which is what you want. Gosh, the town of Wrightsville Beach has had their since 2008, and they're still pumping 22 pay stations that are working. So.
Would you be willing to enter into an initial contract that was a combo of the guaranteed lease plus revenue sharing above a certain
We would.
revenue point?
We would. We would. Because that way we would be guaranteed to at least cover what we need to cover from a capital investment outlay, and then anything above and beyond that we'd be willing to share. Yes, ma'am.
And Steve, you had the pictures up, excuse me, of those houses on the west end. That is, if we are able to complete that project, it's going to be $3.5 million, and that, being able to do that approximate mile of engineered beach is a side benefit to the initial purpose for this project, and that is to clear that eastern channel. Earl and I went down fishing on the point this morning, and at low tide, from The point right there at the end of Kings Lynn over to Sheep Island was sand. There was no water. It is completely closed off going up into our eastern channel. So we've got to find some way to get that project done this coming winter season.
I'm
don't.
concerned about these houses on the ocean front, that's what I'm concerned. And it's probably gonna be some more, they're gonna be in the same shape
Yeah.
if we have another winter like we did last winter.
I sincerely believe that all this filling in there and the motion of the ocean is what caused that to erode so far up into the west end of our beach. We've lost more than 70% of the beach that we had when Earl and I bought here in 95 down there at the point, from Kings Lynn to the end of the point. So we've got to do something to get that completed.
Does any of your other towns have parking, multi-space parking spaces that they lease the property from an individual, or is it all owned by the municipalities?
It varies. The city of Myrtle Beach, we do. They're hybrid lots, they're hybrid spaces, they're private lots, and there'll be a revenue sharing between our client, and of course the property owner. Some towns will deem it as a conflict of interest. Well, how are you going to manage theirs if you're managing ours? So I think it's very sensitive to the environment that you're in. If it's something that the town is proponent for, it's something that we will work with you on, and we'll give you, lease offers that we've done in the past that you can see the example and see if that's the way you want to go, so at least you have a rule of thumb.
What I'm getting at, if the individuals wanted to lease it, would they lease it to you, to Lanier, or would they lease it to Oak Island?
To Oak Island.
Okay.
We would work for Oak Island. Okay, you would contract with us. We would not contract with anybody else while we were contracting with you, so we would prefer to run it through you.
I'd like to see us put together a field trip to go view some of these properties, these projects. Could we do that?
Yes, sir.
Maybe the one in Wellington and the one at Wrightsville Beach. Both are close.
Wellington, Wrightsville.
Madam Clerk, would we be able to put together a field trip somehow and keep it
Well,
open to the public?
For everyone to go, we just have to announce a special meeting and say where you're going to be and what time you're going to be there.
We might be all over the city of Wilmington in 3 hours.
Might be easier just to break it up and do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Jim, that we need to do a formal, quote, field trip.
Well, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, perhaps you can get with Lanier Parking.
I want to see the operation. I want to see what it looks like. I want to talk to the people and talk to them and see what they tell me. Not that I don't trust you.
I understand.
But I would like to talk to
ask
them
that
and see what they tell me, and,
diligence.
yes, I think that's imperative that we do that.
Yeah, I'd like to see it too.
And I'd also like to suggest that we ask the managers or the development services of these towns and cities to communicate with Steve and let him know how well it's working.
Yes.
Every situation like this is going to have issues.
It
What
is.
issues have they
It's not
faced?
perfect.
Yeah.
I started tonight saying it's not going to fix everything for sure. Everything has issues. So I'll be open and honest. And I urge you guys to do your diligence, to check our references, to see firsthand experience what we're about.
How are golf carts handled in the parking?
If they're DOT certified, they're going to have a license plate, which we could give them a citation for sure. If they're not, our hands are pretty much tied. So it just depends on what your streets allow.
If they're in a parking space and they don't have a tag on them, then van needs to give them a traffic violation and make them tow it away because you can't drive it on the streets, except for handicap.
But basically, it's a vehicle and it will take up a regular space.
It will. It will. In some places they've got like Surfside Beach we also have, which is a smaller community outside of Myrtle Beach, and they've got golf cart parking. And it's specially built spaces for that size of vehicle, but they're treated the same way. You've either got a town decal or you're going to pay for parking. It's not that they're free.
Could we, as everybody knows, there was an extensive Facebook conversation. Thank you, Lee. But there were some very good, valid suggestions from quite a few people on there. Someone suggested that our rental agencies, when they rent these staycations, vacations, that they charge an additional fee and issue a placard or whatever,
A weekly permit.
and that would pay for a weekly permit.
And it would be administered through our office or actually through, the pay stations.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could be included in their rental, and then the rental agency could pick up those passes from our office each Sunday or Saturday whenever it turns over. We would have those readily available, and they could pay for them.
And I would like to see it that anyone that owns property here or lives here that has those blue stickers can park anywhere they please without having to pay.
I think this is all stuff that the board can put together on a wish list of what they would like to see, and maybe get it to you, and
Yes.
would that
Yes.
be, Bear, would that be okay?
Yep.
Everybody just write down some of the things that they have concerns about, or wish that they could see put into play, and just get back with them about it.
And I had somebody ask me today, gosh, it wasn't on Facebook. Who it was? There's quite a bit of non-buildable property on the beachfront that has been donated to the town. We own.
We've looked at that.
Can we put parking spaces on those? No. Can we look
Talked
at that
about
and determine? I mean, I know
today
you.
with Chris, he's got a map of a number of those. I think, what do you say, Van, that they could get out of those unbuildables?
The 2 or 3 lots he's looking at, I think he said maybe 11 spots.
11 spots, and then there's some singles, I think, where you can get 3 or 4
There's a lot of
cars.
spots, even where Carol and Jim are talking about down in Clamory in that area, where you could put bumpers out and designate parking spots.
So you could actually increase it. There's areas we could increase the number of parking spots.
Perhaps we could ask that, at some future meeting, council approve additional parking spaces wherever our police chief and Public Works and you recommend.
Okay. I think that maybe it would be, just as a suggestion, Mayor, I don't know what the board would like to do. I guess, first of all, does the board have an interest in at least pursuing or looking at this further? I'll ask that.
I definitely do, but I think one of the next steps is I need to see the operation.
I agree.
I want to see it, I want to look at it, I want to talk to the people that are paying the bills. And, so yeah, I'm willing to go that far with it.
Suggestion that our town clerk get with Carrie
Okay?
and work up some suggested dates and times, and everybody go on this field trip, unlike those of you that begged out of riding the beach.
If you don't want to go, you can stay at home.
If you don't want to go, you can stay at home. So if you don't mind, please
You're
kind of
kinda
do like
busy
you
to
did
be
with the beach
sightseeing,
tour,
right?
suggest some dates and times, and guide us into what we would have to do if there was 3 members or more of council that was going on the tour with them.
I will consult with the School of Government, yes, ma'am.
Consult with the school of government. And we may not be able to have the council member.
Understand.
Yeah.
We could also take 2 vehicles.
But that certainly would not stop you from getting in touch with them and going up there, each of you individually.
Okay, so the clerk's going to get the arrangements worked out on a field trip,
Yeah, yes,
and
ma'am.
that would be for Myrtle Beach and Wrightsville Beach, and do you have a suggestion for another one that would be good?
Wrightsville Beach and Wilmington.
Rice
I
Beach
think
and
that's
Wilmington
in
will be closer, to
Okay,
communities
that would be
together,
good.
and that will kind of negate Myrtle Beach, you know what I
what
mean?
we said,
We can see
Washington
Myrtle
Beach.
Beach later, once you guys really love what we're doing. But then that way you're in our nook right here, and that'll be a good opportunity to expose you to the elements of parking.
I think that one thing that came out tonight, I think that I certainly realize it's a lot more to parking than just what meets the eye on the surface. It's a lot more complex. Would you agree with that statement, Van?
It's just parking.
It's a lot to it. And the violations, how to pay for it, the appeals, the tickets, the price, if the price is established, number of spaces, where you can get additional spaces, and the more people that we get that move across the waterway and up in the county, the more pressure it's going to put on the town to do something about it. So I think that's my main concern.
As you noted earlier, Councilor Royal, former council member Royal, is with us this evening, and she'll remember, I remember all the way back to December of 2003 and even before, every council has discussed in some way the issues we were going to face with parking when that new bridge opened. And she and I spoke before the meeting. I told her that I remember she being very organized on keeping the council on track on designated parking spaces for residents. She brought that regularly. Okay, we suggest these, we suggest those. So I believe it was the beginning of last year that we last looked at that. So perhaps we can, after you determine how many more we can add.
I ask, and I appreciate you guys coming tonight, Mr. Jordan and Mr. Franks, that put together the maps, that we looked at last year. I guess we really don't need to look at them tonight. I hate that I asked them to come in, but maybe we can look at it another time, another day, if there's any further interest in it.
On the beachfront, you were mentioning meters.
Yes.
We are allowed to put meters. Camera regulations allow placement of those meters in parking spaces.
I don't think it really covers something like that, I can check and see, but I'm almost sure that there's not a regulation on that. You haven't run across that before at your other beach towns, have you?
I have not, no. I definitely urge you to definitely double check, and I've provided the town, as they know, like a,
Yeah, I can check with.
Really be no more than putting up a sign, because you just have a pole that goes in the ground, right?
Right.
There'd be no more than putting up a sign.
And we can't pave them or put impervious surface there, but we could put up meters and poles and.
Put them in concrete.
I'll check just to make sure, but I don't think there's anything.
And when the council did discuss these designated spaces in years past, they discussed at length the methods of enforcement, and they, at that time, that council totally decided against towing.
Right.
That's why we got the boots.
Operations do, just so you know, that basically comes from more private entities, private lots, so they can go ahead and get the car out. But many, there's not a city I work for that will tow you.
Yeah.
They'll boot you, but they won't tow you.
Well, they had one of the, might have been Council Royal, former Council Royal, that said it. Mom and dad on the beach with the kids don't
Yes.
realize they parked illegally.
Back without a car.
At least with a boot, they can get in the car and turn it on and have the air conditioning until you guys come out and let them out of jail.
Right.
So,
Right.
Okay, so next step.
What, can I say one more thing? I think there was one other thing that Ms. Sword would like to share with the board that she's been working on.
Please.
And this is in regard to being able to keep some of the penalties or violation money. And I'll let Ms. Sword talk about that for just a minute or two.
Thank you. I passed out just before the meeting to you some informational material from the North Carolina School of Government. And we've had some talks before, and I think the mayor had even mentioned in a prior meeting about how our parking fines that we collect at this point have to be turned over to the school system. And there's been a lot of talk about that for the last few years. It was something that had come out in an audit in years back. And then we began having to turn over all of our fines, with the exception of up to 10% that we were allowed to keep for administrative expenses, to the school system. And so as we began looking at the idea of, well, how do other people do paid parking, and how can we make sure that we're able to do this and not end up having to pay money to the schools and losing money out of this idea, we began to try to figure out how they were doing it. The town of Wrightsville Beach and Carolina Beach both reference the same thing, and it's the manner in which you enforce your ordinances and the way your ordinances are written. And we had talked before with the School of Government about how our ordinances were written and what we had to do, and it was just all hands down, you have to send it to the schools, you have to send it to the schools. And so these documents have finally gotten a little clearer and helping me to understand why that was the case and what we could do differently in the future. And basically what happens is when you have a criminal penalty, if the police write an ordinance or write a ticket under the General Statute 14.4, that it's a criminal penalty when they have that ticket, and so that money has to go to the schools. Right now, the way our ordinances are written, everything, parking and some of our other traffic sort of violations, are civil penalties, and the officer has the option to escalate that to a criminal infraction at his discretion. So And if there's repeat offenses, it also can be escalated. Because of the way that's written, that ties our hands. Should we desire to go to a paid parking program, or even if we don't desire to go to a paid parking program, it would be helpful for you to review the information that's in this book, because there are pros and cons in this handout to having a civil ordinance instead of a criminal ordinance. And basically the long and short of that is that there's different collection mechanisms, there's different enforcement mechanisms, and we know ordinance is criminal, and bear with me because this is obviously not my area of expertise. Fines I get into, enforcing ordinances is not so much. But when you have an ordinance that's civil, in order to collect the money, we collect it as a fine. And if you don't pay the money, then that can be collected through civil proceedings only. In other words, the police officers can't go and arrest you if you don't pay your fine. Now, if it's a criminal violation, the police officers can go and arrest you. And so it's very different in the manner in which you can collect that. And that's why boots and those sorts of things on parking violations are necessary if you're doing it in a civil manner instead of a criminal manner. Additionally, if you're writing a criminal ticket, the only person in North Carolina, persons who are allowed to do that, are sworn officers. If you're writing a civil violation, then you can have someone who's not a sworn officer writing that violation and collecting that fine. So there's different ways that this could be set up, and the key with that is, at this point, the check that I had to write last year for the schools was roughly $15,000. The town could change that in a way that it could keep those fees if they were civil fines and not criminal penalties. And there's a lot of little caveats to it, and those are listed. There's examples in this handout basically about how it needs to be remedial in nature and not necessarily punitive in nature to be able to keep that fine. And so you have to figure out the cost. There's some calculations that have to go into calculating what cost is to make it remedial. But either way, I think this is something that it would benefit the council to take a look at further. Regardless of whether or not you look at going with the paid parking plan, I think we need to evaluate, is it the intent of the council to have the town enforce these criminally, or is it the intent of the town to have us enforce them civilly, and then understanding the differences between the two? That make sense? Any questions? Awesome. Thank you.
Good information. Thank you.
Mayor, could I ask the chief, do you have any comments you'd like to make, Ben?
I just want to hit on some concerns I think that were brought up. One thing that would have to be looked at is exactly what Councilwoman Painter discussed, and that's the right-of-way issue. The way our right-of-ways are set up right now, it is not a violation to park in a right-of-way. You have 72 hours to park in a right-of-way. So therefore, anybody can park in front of a house, in front of the house that doesn't belong to you, on the beachfront or anywhere in the town. So that's something that would have to be, we'd have to figure out a way to do that in the beachfront area and maybe not do it in the second or third row, because that's the area we're looking at, is the beachfront area. Right now, the same thing she said, if you have it to where people can park legally somewhere without paying, then those people are going to park in those right-of-ways. And we got, 10 miles of right-of-way. So that's going to be something that the council would have to look at, looking at doing something with a right-of-way issue. And Steve knows I'm opposed to signs. We've got signs all over the place. So I don't know how you would do that, but that's something that the manager and the council would have to look at doing. The other issue is the enforcement issue. We wrote the tickets, and I think Steve pointed out we wrote 280 tickets through the fiscal year. Which doesn't sound like a lot, and she's proposing they're going to do 56 a day, I think with three ambassadors. We have 4 officers on the road at any given time, and I'll just give you a perfect example. As today, we had 1 off today, and there was 3 on the road. All 3 were tied up at the same time on vehicle accidents, and that's the norm. We get tied up on any call that we get dispatched to, whether it be a barking dog, child locked in a car, disturbance, shoplifter, we have to respond. And when we respond, we're maybe away from parking violations. So we're not, unfortunately, parking violations are the low end of the totem pole for us. So we don't concentrate on parking enforcement and violations unless we get complaints. Certain areas of the town, 72nd Street, Barbie Boulevard, 58th Street, 64th Street, some of the hot areas, we get complaints, especially 72nd Street around the St. James by the Sea. So we respond to those complaints, and we do pay special attention to those areas because we have the no parking area, the signs posted and so forth. And that's where the gist of those citations that we wrote during that fiscal year were from 40th Street east, just like Steve said. Since we've been talking to Lanier, I've been kind of spot checking the residential parking spaces throughout the beachfront. And just like the manager said, from 40th west, there's like one spot for each access. And very rarely are those spots utilized. But you go 40th Street east, and they're always used. So we've got residential parking spaces all the way down to the west end that don't hardly get used, at least during the week. Now, on the weekends, it may be different. So that's another thing we need to look at is maybe moving some of the residential parking east where it looks like most of the residents want to go and paid parking that way. I think that was about all the ones I hit on. I will say that the Lanier parking, I'll give a perfect example, and I don't want to do this on TV, but I'm going to anyway. I went to Carolina Beach. I go to Carolina Beach. I go to Wrightsville Beach. I go to Wilmington. I utilize the paid parking and use the phone. I illegally parked in Carolina Beach. I got the citation, and I paid it before I left the beach. I got the citation right then. Me and my wife was there. We drove straight to their office on Carolina Beach. I paid it right then, convenient, and left. It was very convenient to find the offices. The directions were on the back of the citation. Paid the $25 citation and left the island. So I will say they have the program works, and they're efficient with their enforcement and collection.
I personally like the idea of making parking violations something that is done administratively instead of having to take the time of our sworn officers. And all the time they have to put into training and everything, and then they're out there writing parking tickets, you know. It's not a good use of your time.
And what Bonnie said, the civil stuff too, we've been looking at that for the last couple of years with the speeding citations. We used to write a lot of civil speeding citations for the benefit of the people that were violating the speed law, because we thought if we wrote the citation on a civil citation, they could pay it. It doesn't affect your driver's license. It doesn't affect your insurance, and you don't have to spend a day at Bolivia in court. But we found out that we were having to turn those fines over, so we stopped that. This is the same thing. We're looking at making everything civil, if that's the way the council wants to go, and it will take the criminal part out of it. There will never be a chance that we could turn a parking violation into a criminal violation, and that would allow her ambassadors to issue civil citations. And in the off-season, my guess is that once you pull up the meters or what have you at the end of the season, we're still going to be responsible for writing civil citations. At least we do that now. It'll just be in a different manner. The money will be collected and dispersed how the state.
I'm sorry. I just want to say one other thing. I spend my Monday mornings, it's from 8 o'clock until about lunchtime, noon. I deal with appeals. And I don't know what percentage, Mr. Franks, we get appealed, but it's a fairly high percentage. And that's what I do. I plan out on Monday mornings. I just do traffic appeals. And I hear every story that you could possibly hear.
Oh, our police officers are just out there trying to get as much money as they can for the town to spend whatever way they please.
Well, the ones I think that are best are the ones that say, well, I'm the only one. Everybody was doing exactly what I was doing, but I'm the only one that got a ticket. So I'm sure the police department went out and singled out that one person.
Or the situations, and Van knows this for sure, that we've run into that they were ticketed because a complaint was called in, and then we get the complaint because they were ticketed. We're special. We should not have gotten these citations.
I did have one person that came in, was parked in front of a fire hydrant, and he was pleading his case, and he got finished with it, and he says, "Is there any way you can let me off the hook?" He said, "I got to get back to work in Wilmington." I said, "Well, what do you do?" He says, "I'm a fireman." I said, "So you want me to dismiss your ticket?" He said, "So you want me to dismiss your ticket, right?" He said, "Well, it doesn't hurt to try." So,
He was honest enough to admit that he was a fireman.
yeah.
Okay, so next step is for Lisa to get with Carrie and the council members and see who would like to go on tours, field trips. And if we need to do it in 2 different field trips. And then after that, we'll depend upon you and Carrie and Van and John and Steve, everybody, to let us know when we need to come back and discuss it again.
I would encourage the board, if they do have interest in this, to pull out a legal pad and just put down what you would like to see.
Yeah.
And questions or concerns that you have in order, if we do move forward in some way, that Lanier will be able to start addressing those. Because like I said, there's no, I guess I'm right, there's no 2 towns exactly the same in their situation, and they would have to custom build it, whatever we'd want, so.
Before we settle in on a field trip location, I mean, I know we talked about Wilmington and we talked about Wrightsville Beach. Wilmington, I can't see us having anything really similar to Wilmington.
They have a beach, don't they?
They do, but Wilmington is more centralized in the downtown area right there on the river. They do
Where
have a
they're metered
residential
parking.
parking program. I mean, if you wanted to see the.
Well, maybe we just need to go to Wrightsville Beach.
Wrightsville is just as well.
Does Wrightsville have areas that are similar, any areas that are similar to our beach?
They do, and they also exemplify the same type of technology that I'd like to deploy here. So you guys will be able to see it, touch it, feel it, and see exactly what it does. So I think that would be a great example, and then you can kind of eliminate. Wilmington does as well. I can accommodate you in both of the same aspects, but Wrightsville Beach is a one-stop shop.
Well, they're
Could
right
always-
there together. I mean,
You could always combine it with the NC Byways Conferences at the Blockade Runner every year.
Need to go before then,
I
Betty.
know. Okay, anything further? Thank you for coming here today. Thank you for working so long with Steve and answering so many questions that you did before we even got into the meeting. If there's no other business the board would like to discuss today, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn or stop.
Did we finish item 3? Did we do item 3?
Oh, Steve, do you still want to discuss the no parking signs and the restricted parking management plan for the no parking sign in restricted spaces, or do you want to?
Let's see, that was in reference to,
I included the lists for informational purposes, and I added discussion of parking management plan. I think that's what.
I guess it's since they passed the previous, it's a
Yeah.
moot
Okay.
subject. Okay. Right.
Does any council member have anything they would like to discuss about that list of the no parking signs and restricted spaces? Okay. If not, Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
But before we go, could I just say one thing?
You got to speak up.
I am.
Yes.
I am. I'm a little slow. I'm not as fast as you. There's been a lot of negative talk and comments about this parking issue. And I've heard a lot, received a lot of emails, and of course I've seen the Facebook stuff too.
Thank you, Lee.
And I just wanted to say this. I think I want our people to understand that no decision has been made about this yet. There's all kind of rumors out there that we already decided we're going to go to parking meters and all this stuff. No decision has been made. We are exploring our options. This may not even be a viable option. We don't know. We're in the exploring process. So I just want everybody to understand that. Give us the benefit of, that's what you've elected us to do, to look at the needs of the town, the needs of the people, and try to take steps that we can to meet those needs, and that's what we're trying to do. And it's a positive thing, because we're doing what you've elected us to do, I think. I hope. So I just wanted to say that.
Yes, you are. Anyone else? Okay, third
Motion to
strike, you're
adjourn.
out. If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Counselor Painter, seconded by Counselor Kaiser. All those in favor? Okay. Thank you again, Steve.
Hour and 15 minutes.